Mm. Hi. Annie, you all right?
Ken, are you okay, Ken? All right, guys, everybody, welcome aboard to another Max's Models live stream. Hope everybody's doing well. First off, we're going to start off with a quick voice check. Make sure you guys can hear me okay. So, I'll be playing the old game of switching glasses around. Okay, Ken? Okay, I can hear me, so I'll turn this down. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome aboard. And boy, have we got some interesting stuff to talk about tonight. First off, though I did not intend this until something just happened a couple of hours ago that got my undivided attention. You guys may recall my neighbor who I've talked about, Colonel Lil John Cummings, who is the backseater, the only Marine Corps Phantom with a full Marine crew to bag a kill during Vietnam. And they actually...
Hey, Ken, I guess we're not doing the sound check.
Yeah, it says right there, 5x5. Look, if they can hear me, they can hear you. So anyway, we all okay.
Questions: do they want to hear us?
Well,
we fit in
hey,
the pecking order here.
They dialed themselves in on purpose, right? So, anyway, as everybody had said, I got a bunch of comments, emails, and everything else from all the glue troopers said you got to make Lil John's airplane. I went, yep. So today I went looking for decal sheets for aircraft 201 of the Shamrocks, the Fighting Shamrocks. Well, guess what, boys and girls? I was shocked to learn that Tamiya's 1/32nd scale F4 Phantom is John's airplane. Now let that soak in for just a second.
Where's the residual checks?
That's not, yeah, that's not how that works. But I was like, okay, let's go to Scalemates and see who makes the decals for this thing. And I said, let's just take a quick look at F4Js. And imagine my surprise when this big 1/32nd scale, Shamrock's F4J number 201 pops up, and I can actually read Major Lassiter and Captain Cummings on the cockpit rails, and which I'm not 100% sure is accurate because I don't know if 201 was their regular airplane. But the phrase "knock someone over with a feather" might be the most appropriate one. Hey, Paul. But I'm still just trying to absorb this. There were 5,000 Phantoms made. The Marines had a few hundred. And then I'm like, oh, this is going to be such a pain. And there is the very airplane I'm looking for. Of course, I won't be making it with all the bombs on it because they now have to go get it. They might even have one at Hurricane Hotties. Now, Ian's out of town right now. He's off in Japan having a grand old time. He and Mason went to go visit. So I'll probably
call in and have him import one directly if he's not in the store.
But I also found out, much to my amazement, that there are already not only several decal sheets for this particular airframe. I kind of failed to realize just how popular this airplane was because it's, the only Marine crew to get an air-to-air kill. So within the Marine Corps and, hard. Now, I don't even know if the good colonel knows that models of his airplane are out there. And as you guys know, I went and found the audio recordings, which I used in the intro. I need to put a link to the gentleman who actually posted all that. I got way behind today. Trying to do that intro took a lot longer than I expected. So, I'm going to, probably get one. I want to go talk to the colonel about it first, make sure he's got a place to put it and everything. And, I've already showed you some of his artwork and stuff, and he wants the story to be told, so
he'll make a place for it if you
I'm sure. And, because this is a 1/32nd scale, you guys know is a pretty big model. And I have read about 6 different accounts, and every one of them, of course, is typical of historical military actions. Every one of them's got certain facts that are different, but and some of them are pretty wild. And I also want to play the audio for him and see if it triggers any of his memories. But he's got, like I say, he has a little trouble remembering things these days. But still, I'm looking forward to this project. So I'm still a little gobsmacked. Now, there's actually a little more to the story, but I really don't think I can go into it yet. But I may have the opportunity here in the near future to meet some big wheels, some big wigs from Tamiya, and if that comes to pass, I just got to bring this up, along with asking them, how come you guys don't make kaiju? Can you imagine a Tamiya Godzilla? Oh, come on, don't tell me that wouldn't be awesome. You know, Japan's biggest model company and Japan's biggest studio. It's like it was meant to be. It's like the meteor hitting the asteroid. But anyway, it's somewhat related. The kit decals of the Tamiya A1 Sky Raider are for 577, which is the wingman of 572, the toilet bomber. Yeah. Yeah, Steve's Bill saying hi. Oh, you guys are. Oh, I see you guys are chatting with each other. So anyway, if Ian doesn't have one of these, I'm going to have him order one. And I guess I don't have to worry about converting the 148 scale one I've got. But also the Flying Mule is making a die cast one. There are a couple of die casts of this airplane. And one thing, if on the off chance you decide to do it, I just happened to fly with a naval aviator on this past trip. And there are a couple of things, and I was almost going to do this show about understanding the markings on naval aircraft. But because they get real confusing real fast. But let me see here. Something that's handy to know is that, okay, I hope I'm remembering this right. I'm sure somebody in the comments section will straighten me out on this. But when you look at a Vietnam era jet fighter or aircraft, everything on there means something. The AJ on the tail, I believe, is which carrier wing you're with. So this is from the USS America. Then, of course, you have the squadron banner, or logo or whatever underneath that. You have the bureau number, which is that long 6-digit number just in front of the horizontal stabilizer, of which usually the last 4 numbers are painted larger. Then, of course, across the spine, you have the aircraft carrier they're serving on, which is the air group they're part of. Then what squadron they are in, of course, whether it's Navy or Marines. And then you move forward. You also, on the rudder, you see the 01, and on the nose, you'll see a 201. The little 01 on the tail is just the last 2 letters of 201. But that is just a squadron designation. The 201 is for that squadron. You'll see a lot of other 201s that are in different squadrons. So you know that this is the America Air Wing. It's a Marine Corps aircraft from VMFA 33. You got the bureau number. And within, I believe, VIA is heavier than air Marine Corps fighter attack. And the 201 is the squadron designation. When an airplane is lost, then another airplane will pick up the 201 number. It'll have a different bureau number, but because this is 5526. After they were shot down and rescued, I think their new airplane was 3911, but it also carried the nose number 201, which I think that tells you that's a squadron exec. I think 200 would probably be the commanding officer. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, so all these numbers and stuff actually mean something. And they change as the aircraft get moved around between squadrons, pilots get moved around. A lot of times you don't see names on the canopy rails because they swap equipment and stuff. It's just an unholy mess, and it drives, for model building, it drives you absolutely bonkers, which is why in some of these shows, the Loyal Order of the Rivet counters are so picky about, okay, what's the date and year and month and day and time of day that this model is supposed to be taking place, because on March 15th, 1973, they changed their paint scheme, which, by the way, they did. I saw some pictures of this very squadron, the same aircraft in 76. About 4 years after that, they'd removed the Marine logo off the rudder and made a few other little diddly changes. And that's how hardcore, aficionados know, they can take one look at an airplane. Oh, I know what year that is and what ship they were serving on, just because it's got this carbuncle painted on it somewhere, which they only had at that time when the moon was full. Yeah, it's a Navy thing. That's exactly it. But you got to give the Navy credit. By God, the airplanes are colorful. Because, let's face it, well, once the Air Force went to air superiority gray for everything, and later on even the Navy did, they really lost the pizzazz. Anyway, I thought you guys would get a little kick out of that. So that's what that all means. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that this is the very airplane I was looking for. I mean, that just never happened. I mean, if you want to build the Spirit of St. Louis or something, yeah. But I just cannot believe it's the very airplane I was looking for. And I don't even, when I see the Colonel again, who, by the way, is the nicest person you could ever meet. In fact, some of the videos about and websites and threads and everything I've been on, guys saying, "Oh, I was in the Colonel's squadron back in '76 or whatever," and they all love him. He's a great guy, and he really is a super sweet guy. To give you an idea how great a guy he is, I keep coming out to get my trash bin out in the morning and to bring it in after they picked it up, and it's already up by my driveway because he's just, he's a military man, got a police there, and he wheels it up for me. Oh my God, I should feel guilty about that, but I don't.
What are the odds that this kit is made and the guy lives next to you?
That's what I can't wrap my head around. It's like the Styrene River. It's like the Styrene River is going, "Hey, you want to see something really impressive?" If I didn't believe in the Styrene River before, I do now.
I'd be down at 7-Eleven buying lottery tickets, but in mass.
I tell you what, and the fact that hopefully in a few weeks I'm going to meet the guy who runs the company that makes it on top of that. I mean, it's just, sadly the pilot passed away, relatively young, from a health issue and many years ago. But Colonel John's doing okay. Little John. And
Nathan says that what I've learned from watching Mike Machat's channel is that no two paint schemes on aircraft are painted the same.
Yeah, Machat's Law. Mike coined the phrase Machat's Law, and he's absolutely right. I walk around, when we got the Embraer 190s, all of our airplanes were factory new. All painted the same. They changed the tail flash every year, but all the airplanes made in a given year would normally have the same tail flash. So the only thing that should be different is the end number, but you always find something. And,
Well, Lemur Crazy says, God is a modeler.
Satan invented photo etch.
One of the guys while you were discussing this chimed in with, "How come Tamiya never made a Godzilla?" Which we had discussed earlier before coming on air. And then 2 or 3 comments down, somebody said, "Yeah, imagine them building a Godzilla with 400 parts."
Yeah. Well, since somebody brought that up, and it wasn't me this time, I have
Hang on a second.
What?
Garfield says, "What next? A JetBlue Airbus with a Max Pilot figure?"
I want a royalty. But God builds 1-to-1 scale. I pitched this to my wife, who, definitely is a much more intelligent and balanced person than I am. But I was like, look.
Okay.
Low bar.
I'm not even touching that one. Go ahead, Ken.
Which one?
Well, I like what Steve said. He says, "I'd buy that. Maybe use a Tarbus as a hanger."
Okay, so if I get to meet this very important person from Tamiya, then and we already have things we need to do, but I, if at all possible, would like to broach that very issue. How come Tamiya never made any kaiju? And my wife thought, well, it's a very crowded market. Everybody, and it's true, there are about 30 companies that make it, so she's not wrong. But I think, but they're Tamiya. I mean, Toho and Tamiya, the two big, the biggest studio in Japan, the biggest model builder in Japan, both with world-renowned reputations. Both are the gold standard in what they do, relatively speaking. I mean, come on. Toho just banked Hollywood with Godzilla Minus One, a $15 million movie that's raking in, that's approaching the $1 billion mark, and I just saw today they greenlit the sequel, which you knew they were going to set up for because Godzilla always gets a sequel.
The three T's: Toho, Tamiya, and Tokyo.
There you go, baby. And Hasegawa already jumped on the bandwagon by using the Godzilla Minus One artwork to rebox their Shinden, which and
dinosaurs are cheaper to license.
But okay, so here was my idea. Suppose, since Tamiya already makes every piece of Japanese hardware, and I'm sure most of you have probably seen Godzilla Minus One. It's post-war Japan, and they could sell it with a scale 0. They've got the ships and everything. They could sell it in different scales. Make a 100-700 scale to go with the Waterline series of ships they make, because they used all those destroyers and everything. Or personally, although I think this is a really bad idea, but I don't think that should stop them from doing it. They make the best 135 scale tanks out there, and a lot of 148 scale. 148 scale Godzilla be what, 4 feet tall? And cost what, $600 maybe? Be easy to accessorize.
I got a question for you. Is there a standard size Godzilla?
No, there absolutely is not. Because one reason Godzilla in every movie is a different size. In fact, in Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Minus One, Shin Godzilla, he's like 4 different sizes because he keeps morphing. And in Godzilla Minus One, he's 2 different sizes because he's pre- and post-atomic bomb exposure. And what I can't believe is all of the similarities between Godzilla Minus One and the idea I wanted to pitch for my Godzilla movie, which took place at the end of the war and had him exposed to radiation, only he was supposed to be a Japanese experiment from that secret unit they had that did all the nasty chemical experiments with 432 or something. And they were supposed to have him like on a ship in the harbor when the bomb went off, and then he mutated. But, it's a lot of parallels. I was like, wow. Somehow they must have heard my ideas. But no, the Aurora Godzilla is probably what, 1 to 200 scale, something like that. I really don't know. The Aurora Godzilla is basically the one from the 63, 64 movie King Kong versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus Kong, however you want to say it. And that's the shape.
Peter asked the same question. How big is Godzilla's size actually?
Well, the original was 50 meters. The original
dinosaurs also work cheaper.
Yeah.
If Clooney had played Godzilla, he would have demanded a cool $1 million.
Isn't it frightening that he knew that, Ken?
Yeah. So 1 to 96 scale, 1 to 95. Okay. So basically HO scale. But look, Godzilla changes sizes in his own movies just because of, when they made the movie, they weren't really paying that close of an attention to it. Because, you have to remember when this was made, it was just a monster movie. No one expected 50 years later people will be out there with screenshots and slide rules and tape measures trying to figure out, on this one he's this tall, on this one he's this tall. And like, look, it was a movie made for kicks, to entertain people in the 1954 audience. They just weren't that particular. No one...
Tamiya would make a 135th Godzilla so it could stomp their 135th Sherman tank.
That's what I was thinking. 135th scale because they have all the tanks that could go with it, and then 1 to 700 scale to go with all their Waterline series stuff. So you could have the aquatic Godzilla with all their little ships and being sunk by it, and then you could have the big one. Now, 1 to 35th scale, that thing would be about 6 feet tall. I mean, that'd be a big Godzilla. But God, that'd be cool. You can do that, you might as well motorize it. Oh, the battles we could wage in the backyard.
1/400th would be more practical.
Now, if you really wanted to make it awesome, what you need to sell with the Godzilla are the self-melting tanks.
Ooh, or already melted tank. The kits come with optional melted pieces.
I can go you one better than that, Ken.
What?
Make the tanks out of chocolate, put a flamethrower in his mouth, then it'll just melt for real. And then you can eat them when you're done.
Open out of wax.
That's the Halloween version. An RC Mothra. Oh, that. And they see, now you're cooking with gas on RC Mothra. And, I mean, Mallory makes the big, 2 foot tall radio control Godzilla, and that's like a, remember what the scale on it is, pretty big. But I think it's a 1/100.
Oh, Bill Paul says tomorrow is the 70th anniversary of the release of the original Godzilla movie in Japan.
That's right. Well, actually, it came out in October of '54. And the reason I remember that is when I got that 50th anniversary edition of the Maru-san Nautilus, I deliberately numbered it because I was going to pose it with my Godzilla. I deliberately, okay, somebody's got something in the background making a bunch of racket. I deliberately numbered it 1054 for October 1954 when the movie premiered in Japan. And, we recently talked about the American that got it into the United States a couple of years later and reshot the parts with Raymond Burr. But I got to be honest, I don't think anybody had any inkling that it would turn into what it turned into. And you can sort of understand in Japan because for them it's a metaphor for nuclear war, but in America it still caught on. And this came out at the same time as like War of the Worlds. And, by the way, Steve, I had a thought. Dan Monroe just put out a new video today on the King Kong, the one they made in the late 70s with Jessica Lange, the Dino De Laurentiis one, which I saw it recently. And I was like, okay, it's not quite as good as I remember, but it's still pretty good. The whole thing with the helicopters is nonsense. I mean, really, what kind of idiot gets that close to a 50-foot gorilla that he can knock the, So, sorry, dude, you're too stupid to live.
Sarah Jane says, if you want melted tanks, just give built models to 10-year-olds. Speaking of our generation.
Well, don't confuse fire with firecrackers. But, I was thinking maybe I would email Dan and make a proposal for fun, maybe an episode of his show. I want you and him to have like sci-fi monster movie trivia game show. You against Dan.
Okay.
Because there are two things you are the definitive source on. Classic, monster movie, sci-fi, that sort of stuff. I mean, you virtually live on Pluto. And the TV station, not the planetoid. And cars. Okay, you have an encyclopedic knowledge.
That's the product of a misspent youth.
Yeah, the glory, as Jackie Gleason said in The Honeymooners. Now, Norton, I shall show you the glorious outcome of a misspent youth. And I would like to get John Kitt and you to do the same thing with cars, because you guys are both gearheads, big time. So make it, just make it sort of like a game show type thing.
Jeopardy.
Yeah. Like Jeopardy, Not sure how we work it. It'd have to be, I guess, a Zoom session or something. And I'd have to come up, the question is, would you write questions for him and he writes questions for you? Or would I write the questions, you both get the same one, and first one hit the buzzer? But I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
And Quartermass investigating Godzilla. I like that. Quartermass investigating Godzilla. Now you see, that's what I like about the Glue Troopers. By God, resourceful thinking.
Rob also said, I had a similar misspent youth with cars. What?
Peter said Godzilla the Young Years. They already made that. It was called Jurassic Park. Boom. But that would that'd be fun. So anyway, getting to the other subject we were talking about is I made the mistake a couple of times of going to museums because I had a bottle I wanted to build and I said, hey, they've got one of these at the museum. I'll go look at it and use that as a source. And when I went and looked at the one in the museum, I was like, okay, I took pictures. I know how to paint it and everything. I painted it. And it was all wrong because the museum had it wrong. Because museums are not perfect. And one of the issues you have as a model builder is if you're trying to make something that's historically accurate, is sourcing, the material now. The internet's made it a lot easier for a lot of stuff. But even things like color palettes and stuff get thrown off, because I was noticing a couple of Corsairs that guys had built that were supposed to be in the South Pacific during the war, Birdcage and some others. And they were beautiful builds, but they were colored just like the photographs. The problem was the photographs were overexposed. So, you've got to be a real nutso rivet counter to let that bother you, but there are a lot of nutso rivet counters out there. And what are you laughing at?
Nathan Bond says, so, wait, hold on. Did anybody else notice Max is wearing a sweater jacket? Is Max cold in Florida?
This is a fleece. And, we had the AC going pretty wild earlier. Warming up now. But I
thought you were going to tell me winter set in, it's down to 55.
Oh, no. 55, I'm wearing a jacket. The fleece is when it gets below 70.
To keep the house pretty darn cold. Trust me, I know.
Oh, yeah. Ken likes his heat.
Whenever I sleep over, they always put extra blankets on the bed for me.
Well, that's in case you die during the night. You're preserved until the grease go.
Yeah, we don't want to smell you. But by the way, guys, it not only does get actually cold down here, especially in the north part of the state where I'm at, but they back 40 years ago, they had a couple of Army Rangers in Ranger School, Ranger cadets, I guess you would call them, or trainees, die of hypothermia here in Florida. It does get below freezing in the panhandle sometimes, and they've even had freezes that have frozen the crops down in South Florida on occasion. So it does get cold in Florida, just not like New York cold. But,
yes. Rob says, in Florida they turn the heat on when it's 65. You're darn right.
You better believe it. Even we turn the heat on at 65. But
65 is cold.
But that's one thing when I'm waiting for wintertime to buy the new air conditioner for the Tarbis, because that's when the air conditioners are cheap in the winter. But we put that heater in there because it gets cold enough in there that the glue and paint won't work properly. So I got to let the place preheat. And
Nathan says he's freezing in Phoenix. It's down to 78. That's like winter for them.
Yeah. Well, they say about Phoenix because dry heat, and I'm like, yeah, so is my oven. I don't live in it.
Peter says, I heard that happened when I was in the Army.
Yes. Yeah. I remember it was all over the Army news. Yeah. And a couple of the Ranger instructors, I think, were probably court-martialed over that, because anytime you're in a military operation, someone dies in training under your command, it does not look good. It is not a good look. But
especially if they didn't get shot.
By the way, speaking of which, I was just telling you that I just flew with a retired naval aviator, and he told me something that not the kind of thing that tends to make the national news, but they had, on one cruise, they had 2 sailors chopped up by the meat grinders on front of the COD plane, the carrier onboard delivery airplane, the C-2. During the cruise, they managed to get 2 guys to walk into propellers, turning propellers.
Whoa.
And I tell you what, those...
Yeah. They just wash them off the deck after that.
People don't appreciate how dangerous it is working around airplanes. Hey, Trey. Yeah. Wing joints have the paint has a true color tint. Yeah, it's really tricky. And people go, look, I use this photograph, and I go, great, your model looks just like the photograph. Unfortunately, that photograph was over or underexposed. and of course, lighting matters. You go out and see an airplane, at noon, and see it again at 6 in the evening. It looks a little different.
Garfield Smith says, same for Western Canada. It's a dry cold. Dry me arse. It is cold.
Yes, Western Canada isn't like, when the Canadians say it's cold, they don't mean like, ooh, let's put on another jacket. They mean like, ooh, look, my arm just broke off and shattered on the floor. But I remember going, one of the coldest I've ever been is actually in Chicago. Man, that wind would cut right through you. But that blows in from Canada, goes over the Great Lakes, and gets even colder. what I love is flying around the Great Lakes, and I see bigger snow drifts and lower temperatures in Buffalo than I see in Canada. I'm convinced that snow is Canada's #1 export to America. But
they can keep it. We really don't want it down here.
But you got to remember, though, the Canadians are set up for it, too. I mean, they have a lot of underground passageways between buildings and everything, and they have the right clothing, and just, they know how to deal with it. I'm pretty sure that hockey was invented so Canadians would find a way to, stay warm by exercising.
I thought that was just a legalized fighting.
Yeah, well, yeah. Worked for the Hanson brothers.
Nathan's having a one-dog night.
Yeah.
But
anybody get that reference?
That sounds faintly. It's like I know what it's from, but I can't bring it up. I'm sorry, when you say Nathan and dogs, I just think of Nathan's hot dogs, but that's where my mind goes. What's this cold thing you speak of? Yeah, down in Florida, we got to import the cold from the magic box in the window.
Nathan says coldest place I've ever been in my life was freaking North Dakota, -27. Go ahead, Steve.
I was up in Alaska. I got pretty wicked.
Below.
Where? Well, when I was in Alaska, it got real 3-dog night. Okay, gotcha. When I was in,
I think we're the only two who got it, Ken.
Yeah, one is the loneliest number.
We
Okay,
went right over Max's head.
One is the loneliest number that you'll ever know.
After we told you, now you figure it out.
Well, I'm sorry. Like I said, you said one dog and Nathan, and I thought Nathan's hot dogs. My mind stopped processing at that point.
Because it's all food.
Like Ken can tell you, if you ever want to hypnotize me, all you need is a cannoli. Focus on the. Oh, never mind. He's already there. Bark like a dog. Do I get the cannoli if I do?
Sarah Jane just says, if the weather gets unbearable here, we just go invade France. It's tradition.
Well, that's like Rowan Atkinson did that hilarious bit on stage where he comes in as Captain Blackadder. He talks about, the cure to all of Britain's problems is invade France. Yes, it's why the British Army was invented to begin with. He goes from Agincourt all the way down.
Hey, salvage made it. Yay! Now we can start.
Minot, North Dakota. My son, my old boss, Air Force MP, had a drive around Minot. That might explain why he was... Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Natasha, they had believe it or not, I swear to God is my witness, one of my friends in the Army had been an Air Force SP, security police, at Minot. And he said he said that the slogan up there was, "Why not Minot? Friesen's the reason." And apparently Captain Slackbladder. And he said the thing that infuriated him the most is they had him guarding like a Gal-8 30mm cannon that had been removed from a plane, and they just put it on a parking stand, but it had to have a guard on it. And he goes, and apparently they forgot about me. For 3 days, all I did was guard that thing in the freezing cold Minot. And I was kind of like, man, I think that counts as cruel and unusual.
Maybe they're just trying to see how long he'd sit out there.
I can't believe it. He's still standing. So, Steve, one of the problems if you go to a car museum is that, obviously, generally speaking, the cars are inside. And frequently under neon light. And you know how neon light alters, especially when you try to photograph it, it alters the tint and color of the paint of a car.
Yes, it does.
So it can make it, you're like, my model car doesn't match the real one. Actually, if you take it outside natural sunlight, it probably would.
It probably would.
Oh, by the way, Nathan, yes, Niagara Falls is frozen several times.
Yes.
Always heard Minot was a great base to be from.
There you go.
Well, when I was in the Army, we sold a T-shirt the guys bought when they were PCS or ETSing. It said, "Happiness is Fort Campbell in your rearview mirror." And
Ken Boy, okay.
Oh, thanks, Ken Boy.
You're welcome.
Ken Boy.
I didn't know we were on the Waltons.
Oh, Ken, good night, Ken Boy. Do they have a car museum in Moscow, Russia? Maybe.
Yeah, they do.
Nathan says, I have a model I built when I was 13 in West Virginia on a very cold winter night that I'm pretty sure to this day the paint has not fully set.
Yes,
right.
But if you built it in West Virginia, I have one question. Is your model car up on blocks? And there's another state Max can't go back to.
Well, you couldn't go back anyway. You have all your teeth.
Oh my! When I was in West Virginia, West Virginians, God bless them, they are very self-aware, and they make all the jokes about West Virginia, like how come they can't solve any crimes because all the DNA is the same. What do you get when you put 30 women from West Virginia in a room together? A full set of teeth. And they just went on, and they just kept going and going and going. I'm like, now, don't get us wrong. We're from here. We can say this. If you say it, we'll take you outside and feed you the pigs.
The coldest national capital is Ottawa.
Ottawa. Is it Ottawa or Ottawa? I've heard it said both ways. Americans usually say Ottawa, but I used to call it Ottawa as a joke, and then I heard people actually calling it Ottawa, and I guess it's an Indian word, so could be.
You ain't seen cold until you were aboard a destroyer in the Bering Sea in January and February.
On iceberg alert. Does West Virginia have an international airport? Their big airport in West Virginia is Charleston, West Virginia, as we call it, Charlie West, which is named after Chuck Yeager, because Yeager's from West Virginia. It's Yeager Field, although everybody else just calls it Charlie West. But I don't think they have customs there, so they may not be international, so they may not have one. I don't think Wheeling has one either. But But you got to remember that is what makes an airport international, is that has customs on the field. There is a little place in Georgia, and I guess somebody important comes in from the islands and hires a customs agent to be out there. It's like Homerville Airport, and it's an international.
You read Bill Paul's thing?
No, reading George Taylor's. The bars in West Virginia have a 2-teeth minimum.
What?
Bill Paul says West Virginia, 12 million people, 7 last names.
Yeah. West by God, Virginia. I got to tell you, I had a lot of fun in West Virginia, but one of the things that now mind you, this is 25 years ago, but we went to West Virginia. We used to overnight Charlie West all the time. By the way, some really good barbecue. I used to go to Joey's. They had these massive ribs, and anyway, Ottawa is also called not a lot. By the way, was it Max Charleston Airport land takeover? It's basically built in a canyon. I was going to bring that point up. When you go on the terminal, Charleston, West Virginia Airport, they have these pictures up on the wall and diagrams that show you how the airport was made. Now, for those who have not been to West Virginia, 20-second history. West Virginia used to be part of Virginia proper, okay? But it was the mountainous region. All the people in the western or the eastern 3/4 of the state, 2/3 of the state, had all the flat bottom land where you could plant crops. But West Virginia, very mountainous, very hard to grow any crops there. So they tended to be very poor. So when the American Civil War happens, Virginia, of course, is the head of the Confederacy, but Lincoln and the federal government go to the people of West Virginia and say, look, if you'll stay loyal to the Union, we'll make you a state. We'll sever you from Virginia and you'll be a state. And that's what they did. So West Virginia, although southern by culture, was a northern state politically, got its statehood as a result and separated from Virginia. So that's why it's Virginia and West Virginia. Anyway, because it's so mountainous, there weren't very many big cities. There was no place to put them, Charleston being the biggest one, and then you got Wheeling. Both of which, by the way, are near river basins. So there's some flatland down there. But for when they needed an airport, I went there to go here. When they needed an airport, they had no place to put one. So they went ahead and just basically chopped the top off 3 mountains and dumped them into the valley. Okay? And somebody needs to quit making all that racket.
I've already taken care of it.
But anyway, so they will tell you in this thing how they did it. And they chopped off 3 mountaintops and excavated it into the valley to fill it in. And they claim they moved more dirt than the Panama Canal, which is very possibly true.
The top off of a mountain.
Well, it's
easier to do it when you're pushing it down.
I was going to say it's easier pushing it out than dredging it up. So, but they did. They made the airport.
They just did that in North Carolina 3 weeks ago.
Oh, too soon. And they didn't do it. Mother Nature did. Hey, Mother Nature, Hurricane Andrew is what cut the Miami Canal. The channel that goes while the cruise ships can go straight into Miami. They've been trying to dredge it out for years and were never able to successfully do it. So the ships had to make these pinwheel maneuvers to get into the port of Miami. Hurricane Andrew blew through and boom, instant canal. And then one good thing to come out of that hurricane. And all they got to do is keep it dredged now. And the ships go in and out, straight in and out. That was a game changer for Miami, for the port. So anywho, but Charlie West still has plenty of mountains poking up around it. That's a very easy airport to hurt yourself in. It's what we call a Sarah airport, special something and something something. Special airspace rules and attitudes, or I forget. Anyway, it means you got to read the brief on it before you go in, and that airport's had its share of adventures. What always cracked me up is one of the runways we would line up on. There's the end of the runway, there's a little valley, and then there's a mountain right off the end, and there's a house right there. And I'm like, what idiot puts their house right on the center line of the runway?
The house was probably there before they built the airport.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. Just remember what happened in Sacramento with the ice cream joint in the F-86. So, for those who don't know, back in the 70s, an F-86...
That's a classic.
An F-86 Sabre, actually a Canadian Canadair Sabre, that an American had bought. The guy flying it had very little time in it. Sacramento had a fairly short runway. He took it to an air show. When he was taking off, the pilot got a little nervous because he saw the end of the runway coming up, and he, as we say in aviation, he picked it green. He tried to rotate too soon, so the airplane just sat back on its tail like that, stalled out the wing so it didn't fly. It just rolled off the end of the... He managed to get it in the air a little bit, and it stalled, came right back down, right into an ice cream parlor. And ironically...
Well, they had Cherry's Jubilee that day.
Well, the pilot actually, an off-duty police officer saw it happen and dragged the pilot out of the cockpit, and he actually survived, but a whole bunch of people in the building were killed, and most of them by smoke inhalation. And it's a real sad story. It was in the 70s. And somebody was filming an 8mm camera, so you see the plane go up and then disappear behind the horizon, and column of smoke. And waste of a perfectly good F-86. But it was just one of those things, so... I firmly believe that you need like a mile off the end of the runway should be a clear zone. Of course, at Fort Lauderdale, those runways, both the northern runway aims right at the that's a long runway, but it aims right at the railroad tracks. If somebody ever goes off the end of that one, they're either going west or going into the highway. Going east, they're going to go into the railroad tracks. I wouldn't call that a classic.
Fast saver into ice cream shop. Hate to eat ice cream.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that a classic.
No, you when you go into Charleston, you make a perfectly normal 3-degree approach. All the approaches are clear. What's weird about going into Charleston is because it is on basically part of it's on a mesa and the other side's a hill, is that you're flying, and of course you just focus on the runway, but you're going over this valley right before you get to the runway, so it's like there's this big, and then all of a sudden there's runway under you. But you just focus on the PAPIs and the glide slope and localizer, and everything works out fine. They did have
Michael Dorn owns an F-86?
Yeah. Worf. Yeah, he's a big airplane. He also has a Sabreliner, or had. I think he sold them, but no, he's a huge aviation guy. And,
I knew he was huge in aviation. I didn't know he owned an F-86.
Oh yeah, he was on some guest on some sort of documentary show where he's out flying it around. There's an F-86 right down the road here for sale in, it was a couple of years ago in Tico, right there by the Cape. It's one of all the stars and stripes paint scheme, and the guy had it on the air show circuit, and I guess he's quitting that, and it was for sale. But I'm like, okay.
You didn't buy it?
Well, Ken, first off, I probably wouldn't fit in the cockpit on F-86. The ejection seat would be a decoration because of my weight. It probably wouldn't clear the canopy rail. And I'm pretty sure if I came home and told my wife that, hey, guess what? I just bought a Korean War era jet. Yeah, you could pretty much go ahead and have the police bring out the body hunting dogs. But these old jets are. This is something people forget. I mean, I love old airplanes, and I like even the old airliners. The Caravelle. We were talking about last time. They just made the model of, which is very tricky to get the dihedral on that just right. The Caravelle's this beautiful airplane, and it had long service. After we talked about that, I went to the wiki page and started looking at the accidents. Oh my God, those things were going down every month. Now, a lot of them were pilot error because it's all round dials. You get in bad weather, some guy gets mixed up on his navigation, flies into a mountain. Some of them exploded. Some of them caught fire. I don't know if they were cargo bin fires or what, but I was like, holy God, And this was a good airplane, but they were having accidents all the time. Now, some of them were operated in these backwaters around the world. Maintenance was probably an issue. I mean, United didn't have any trouble with them because they had first-class maintenance and well-trained crews, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But you see all these fighters from the era, flameouts, blade separations. I mean, it was just... You really want to hang your life on a 60-year-old jet engine, that was built with 40s technology? I mean, they're beautiful to look at. I love them, but, no. And some of them, like the F-84, had notorious reputations for engine failures. The pilots were so good at handling flameouts that, and I actually talked to a guy who used to fly them. It's like, I heard you guys had a lot of flameouts and things. So, yeah. So what do you do? Oh, yeah. And he could tell you the memory action items. Oh, you pull it back to idle, do this, and this, and then ease it back up. Hit the gang switch for the restart. And I'm kind of like, you did that 50 years ago, and you can remember that crisply. He's like, well, you do it often enough. It's like answering a phone.
KLS&C said, Max, you mean Mrs. Max wouldn't buy the line? But dear, it's just a 1-to-1 scale model.
Yeah. Sure.
And so with the coffin she put him in.
Rod says you can always sleep in the F-86.
No, you really can't. I've sat in those planes. They are actually fairly uncomfortable. Of course, you remember those guys are sitting on a survival kit or whatever, which had a pad on it, but you weren't in them very long. They didn't even have that long of a duration. I mean, look at all the jets of the era. They're always bagging 3 or 4 drop tanks because they guzzle gas so fast. And the worst thing you can... If you want... Now, this is a model airplane thing. I know a lot of modelers like to make their models clean because they want to look at the airplane. I get it. It looks pretty. F-16 looks great with just a couple of sidewangers on the wingtips, and it's just a sleek-looking airplane. But you go out and watch an operational F-16. It's carrying 3 drop tanks. I mean, the wings are sagging with all the crap that's hanging off of it. The thing can barely get off the ground. It's this, and like I tell you, if you're going to build model jets, the first thing you got to learn to do is buff out the seam lines on your drop tanks, because that and the canopy is the first thing any judge is going to go to when you build your model. If you don't make your ordnance look good, because jets are military jets are delivery platforms for weapons. So if you make the airplane clean, it's all very pretty. I mean, if you're doing the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels, yeah, that's the way they fly them. Even I think the Blue Angels used to put fake missiles on the bellies of the Phantoms just to look good. But the ordnance, it can take longer to make all the ordnance for a model than it does to make the model. And just something as simple as Max has a poster to Jet Pilot. Yeah, I do. That's right. I have a poster of the movie Jet Pilot. It came out of a magazine, not the big full-size poster. But
Peter asked, does anybody remember the movie?
Oh yeah, that probably one of the crappiest movies John Wayne ever made, but I love it because of the airplanes. The movie was just utterly ridiculous. But it
probably needed tax money.
Well, what it is the Duke. He wouldn't hesitate to do any movie that had an anti-communist theme. That was a thing. You know.
Garfield says, Peter. Unfortunately, yes.
Although it did give you a good look at a lot of the equipment of the era, but the characters in it were cliched. It was and it was a Howard Hughes movie. Hughes loved making anti-communist movies, and Jet Pilot was just a stupid movie. But a lot of great airplane footage.
Is that the movie where he tells them to pull the yellow handle to adjust the seat?
Yeah, they eject the guy. No, she tells him to do that. Hey, Fran. Late check-in from Orlando. No worries. Howard Hughes was always making, anti-communist movies. And let's face it, you get right down to it, if you're like a lot of us, you're a kid building models, in the 60s and 70s, basically it was a good way to turn us into little warmongers. I want a Phantom racked full. My mom's like, why don't you buy something like, a nice airliner or something like that? I'm kind of like, what? One of those sissy airplanes that's got no guns? Ooh, what wrong with that?
Peter wants to know, did they use models in Jet Pilot?
Not that I know of. Actually, everything I remember seeing in that movie was real air-to-air footage. Of course, Hughes was a huge aviator. He liked to do that stuff, and the military kind of gave him carte blanche. But the F-86s, F-84s, they even had the XF-92 posing as a MiG that Delta Wing thing Convair built that Wally Schirra said was a real nightmare to fly, that nobody ever wanted to fly. That was a precursor to the F-102. And I don't remember seeing any models in it. I think they even the F-89, one of the few movies that shows some F-89D Scorpions doing their thing. And I don't know if you guys watch the YouTube channel, Not a Pound for Ground, but the fellow just did a really long on the AIM-4, the Falcon missile. I didn't realize the Falcon missile had 7 or 8 kills in Vietnam. And, of course, it had about 60 misses. But it was rather interesting. I got to give that guy credit. He really does his homework. But I think the whole missile thing... By the way, did you guys know that not a single Navy F-4 in Vietnam ever had a gun? That was an Air Force thing. They had the gun pod. I think it was the M61 pod. They had the gun pod they could put on it, but it was so inaccurate they didn't worry about it. But I didn't realize that the Navy F-4s never had guns. And that little one thing on the chin that they had, that I think was actually an IR sensor. But the later model, the J model, which you see the picture of here, did not. There's no chin on it of any. It's just a clean radome. And
I'd read that they decided to take the guns out because the stupid idea that we'll never get close enough to do a gunfight.
Well, that was almost true. You have to remember, Ken, that the Navy and the Air Force had different missions for the airplane. The Navy, it was a fleet defense interceptor. Its job was to go up and shoot down incoming bombers that were a threat to the carrier. That was its job. That's what it was. It was a fleet defense interceptor. And they had the F-8 Crusader as their dogfighter. They had the A-4, the A-7 for attack, and they had the A-6 for bombing. and of course the props for sub hunting. So the job of the Phantom was, and there was one reason it's so bloody fast. People forget the Phantom was faster than most fighters that exist today. I think the F-15 and the F-22 are about the only fighters out there that could keep pace or maybe outrun a Phantom. The F-35 is like Mach 1.6, and the Phantom could do like 2.4, 2.6, something like that. And of course, it had to be clean. But the whole idea was blast off of the carrier, go into burner, streak up to altitude, get out there as fast as you could with that big radar. That's one reason the plane's so big, is you need that big radar. Find the bombers, shoot your missiles, shoot them because bombers are not going to outturn a missile, and then haul butt for home. It was not intended as a twisty-turny dogfighter, which is how it was used in Vietnam. In fact, I was watching reports of this very airplane of Bear and Little John's dogfight, and they expended 4 Sparrows and didn't get a single hit on a unarmed 2-seat Mig-21 they were chasing. That had an instructor pilot who knew what he was doing. He was a Russian and a Vietnamese student. And he saw Bear coming, so when he fired, he was down low altitude, which made it hard for a radar-guided missile to track, and he was able to outturn the missiles. And then they fired the other 2, and he outturned them. But they was running light on gas, and they'd scoot for home, and they popped him with a Sidewinder. And that was the one that they shot down. The other one was going, and he actually dodged a couple of Sidewinders. I think it was a third Sidewinder that got him, and he was just about out of gas. So dogfighting wasn't much of or hitting the burner wasn't really an opportunity. The last one they tagged, but it limped home, and that was another MiG-21. But that was their last missile. So they fired 8 missiles for 2 hits, and but because they weren't made, the missile was not made to hit a fighter in a turning dogfight. That's one of the reasons the Falcon missile didn't fare well. They did shoot down some MiGs, but my guess is the MiG pilots never knew they were there, because when they saw them and turned hard, they were able to outturn them. And go watch that video about the development of the Falcon on Not a Pound for Ground. He talks about how the Sparrow and the Falcon kind of stacked up against each other, and it's what you're looking at when you look at that F4. You're looking at an integrated weapons system. You've got a missile system, a radar, and an airplane that are all built to work together. One of the reasons that they like the Sidewinder so much is you can bolt it's a standalone system. You can bolt it onto anything, and all you got to do is because the missile's got its own tracker head, all you got to do is put something in the cockpit to tell you when you got a lock, and let her fly. I mean, the Army puts Sidewinders on stuff. I mean, that's basically the Chaparral, their anti-aircraft missile system on tracks. And they still had those, I think, when I was in the Army. They're gone now. But they actually had a little track vehicle with a pair of Sidewinders called the Chaparral. And I don't think they ever used it in combat. But it was there. I wonder if anybody makes a kit model of the Chaparral. That was always kind of a neat-looking little system. Look like something should be on the surface of the moon hunting UFOs. If you guys remember that episode of UFO where they basically used a chassis of Panther tanks and put missiles on them to hit the low-flying UFOs that were attacking moon base, kind of reminded me of the Chaparral. And,
we are going Captain Tangent Strong here tonight.
Whee! Going in a straight line is boring. Trust me, I do it for a living. And although I will say, leaving St. Martin the other day, looking at that mountain filling your windshield when you take off, definitely focus you.
Oh, Good Guy's Gun says, Max, my dad flew one. I quote him, if we would have had guns, there were many times we could have gotten more kills. Oftentimes those old misses, or I guess he means missiles, would malfunction. A good turn equal, you get 3 good missiles.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't, pull up, yeah. Actually goes, terrain, pull up. And,
even in the fighters?
That wasn't a high Chaparral. To me, a kit Chaparral, okay. They actually had a bunch, and I didn't realize this. some of these things have a fairly primitive ignition system. It's a lanyard, and when the missile drops, the lanyard pulls, the motor fires. And apparently they had a dogfight about 10 years ago over Syria. A couple F-15s mixed it up, and they had like 4 missiles that just fell off the rails and didn't ignite. One of the... It's weird. A missile has got a lot of technology in it, and it's got to be very well maintained. And these things, when they're in storage, if any moisture gets in, there's all kinds of ways a missile can get messed up before it ever gets mounted on the airplane. And in Vietnam, one of the things they learned was they tested these things in the desert. They were all built with white gloves and, put on the airplane by engineers, and everything was, oh, look how great it works. And it did. And then they get where the average high school graduate who, went to the 6 weeks armor school or whatever, is putting them on Phantoms in Vietnam, and the missiles are going up. They're not getting fired. They're coming back. So great. We're in a very humid environment, which this thing's not used to. It hasn't necessarily been vapor sealed. We're taking it up to 30-odd thousand feet and just freezing it. Okay. Then we're bringing it back and heat soaking it again, up and down and up and down. And then after its 12th mission, maybe something happens. They got to fire the thing, and now you just expect it to work. And it's a real learning laboratory, and it's still a problem today. Even though you got a lot of solid-state electronics and everything, and stuff's gotten so much better, and missiles today are extremely deadly, they still have I don't know what the failure rate is, but they still fail from time to time. And put it on. Yeah. I do not have an HOA. That's right. There were 2 kinds, the heat seeker and the radar guide. In fact, he talks about both of them. And that's right. They each had some relative advantages. I think the big thing the Sidewinder having going for it was cheap. It was just easy to use, even though it was a longer missile. But and if you read that, he gets into all the constraints and why things were done a certain way and how they kept modifying stuff. And if you've ever built the Monogram F-106, which I did, the Falcons that come on that are the late models that have the extra strake on the fin that goes way up near the warhead. But if you build the F-102, it's got the one with the little canard, little round canards up front. And I always noticed they were different. I just figured, okay, different versions of missile. He actually got into the very detail of it. And when he was talking about it, I was like, oh, I know what he's talking about because I built models of that. Of course, I'm the guy that takes all the extra missiles that are left over, glues them to a sprue, and sticks them on top of a model car. Yeah.
Well, Nathan says you can do the aviation equivalent of a car on blocks by the F-86 and put it in a stick in your front yard.
Yeah, that's going to go over real well.
Everybody in the neighborhood will love you, Max.
The guy next door will. He'll probably come out and try and fly it.
Or you could just point the plane at the guy next door with the missiles on it.
I would like to have a missile in the front yard with my mailbox on it.
Well, there's one at Skycraft.
I can just see what the kids would do with that on Halloween night. How about you, Ken?
One of the systems that never got used, of course, was, they fielded it, was the Mace. They built the Matador, it didn't really work, so they built the bigger version, the Mace, which they got more or less to work. And they did their time in the Air Force on guard duty as winged missiles like the Snark, the SM-62, and then eventually they were replaced, so that the Air Force found itself with all these airframes it didn't need. So, they pulled the engines and warheads out of them. They had all these empty airframes. So what do? You give them all the VFWs around the country. And I can remember all these VFWs. Out like in Panacea, Florida, there was this Mace up on a stick. And one of the happiest days of our lives when my brother and I went and realized that whatever had happened, they'd taken it down off the stick and just laid it on the grass. And now we had our own jet airplane to play on.
Oh, Peter asked an interesting question. Did they have Sidewinders on the F-86s?
Yes.
I think they had them.
In fact, I think it was the first jet to be fielded with them. They might have put them on the F-84s first, but I know the F-86s had them. And I think it was an F-86 that fired one at a Chinese, I think it was a Taiwanese F-86 that shot one at a Chinese MiG. I think it was a Chinese MiG, and it stuck in the side of the plane and didn't detonate. So they sent it to the Russians, who reversed engineered it, and made the ATOL.
I thought the Russians stole.
No, the Chinese gifted them one that they got stuck in one of their planes. Yeah, yes, the Falcon was meant to shoot down bombers, and it probably would have been pretty good at it. This is what you have to remember about missile development. Most missile development for air-to-air started off as a bomber defense. When bombers had propellers, sending up jet fighters with Mighty Mouse rockets or 20mm cannons was fine. An F-86 could run down a Tu-4, not a problem. But now you're talking about, jet bombers. That's not going to happen. So they needed missiles. No bomber out there, no big multi-engine bomber is going to outturn a missile. So that's fine. But some of the stuff they cobbled together to make this work off the existing platform, the old F-89 Scorpion, which, I don't think I've ever built a model of that kit. There are two airplanes I don't think I've ever built. For some reason, I don't think I've ever built a Focke-Wulf 190. I have no idea how that missed me. I know that's the one monogram kit in 148 scale that I never built. I think I've built everything else in their 148 series. But also, I don't think I've ever built the F-89 Scorpion, which was not a great airplane. But it was big, and it did have a lot of electrical power, which is what they needed to run these radars and these early missiles. So they were actually putting the Falcons with those big delta fins into the recesses of the tip pods where they used to carry the Mighty Mouse rockets. And they'd cover up the nose cone, but that was not a great system. These things, it's that kind of abuse. But it looked weird to see this airplane with these three big missiles, sticking out halfway, semi-recessed out on the wingtips. I'm like, it really looked like what it was, something that was kind of kludged together. And
the class says my VFW post is located next to a river that flows every couple of years. We hope a decommissioned Ohio class will come our way.
Well, Chaddock talks about the F-84Fs. That is true. In fact, the F-84F is the swept wing one. When I went to military school, I went 1 year to Marion Military Institute in Marion, Alabama, and we had an F-84F up on a stick. The thing that was different about that was a little odd was it also had a second pole going up to the tail as a reinforcer. I'm not sure how. That's the only one I've ever seen that was mounted that way. But the F-80, it was an F-84. I'm thinking, there was a time when this thing was the latest, hottest piece of equipment, and it went down the production line, and people worked very hard to get it right, and mechanics worked hard to maintain it, and pilots were out there, flying them, flying their missions, and now it's on a stick at a military school. I knew I was officially getting older when first time I saw an F-15 Eagle on a stick, because my brother and I had, out of the magazines, out of the Air Force magazines, we had pictures of the YF-15, YF-16, and YOA-10 in our bedroom growing up. Okay? And the models were out before the plane was. And I'm like, and now they're on sticks. And ironically, I joke, but the F-16 and F-15 are still in production, but the A-10 is not, and it's still in service. Just, as the old joke is, the F-15 and the F-16 brag that my plane has a gun. The A-10 says my gun has a plane. No, literally, the A-10, they said, okay.
Pretty close.
Let's take this big 7-barrel 30mm rotary gun that is larger than a Volkswagen and heavier. Okay, make it fly. And everything was... Yeah.
They actually have a minimum airspeed at which you have to be flying at before you can shoot the gun, because the thrust from the gun will actually slow the plane down below stall speed.
Yeah, and you have limited trigger time also. You have a minimum speed and a maximum trigger time. And it carries a lot of ammo. What I love was, the first time I saw an A-10 do its thing, I was in the Army. It's a Califax ring, a Combined Arms Live Fire Exercise, Califax. And You see the thing come down, and you see the white smoke trail out from under, and you don't hear anything. And then a few seconds later, you hear, brrr, and you look down range, and you just see what looks like an eruption of small volcanoes. And then later on, you hear, brrr. I was like, well, that's interesting. I would never want to be on the receiving end of that. And
nope.
But the A-10
I saw
pilot,
a video one time. I guess it was from Iraq. There was a, what would you call it? Like a circular green area where there was a bunch of trees growing. It wasn't very big, maybe a couple hundred.
what, an oasis?
Hey. Sorry about that.
Are the children doing something dangerous to themselves and others?
There was a dispute.
Dispute resolution, because I said so.
Okay. All right. So anyway, what I was talking about, so it's kind of, like a little bit of an oasis, maybe a couple hundred yards across, and somebody had spotted a bunch of Taliban going in there, and so they called it an A-10 on it, and there's a video of this whole thing going on, and an A-10 comes in, flies over it, you see the little shells smoke coming out, and then a little bit later, the eruption of everything inside that little spot of area, and guy says, man, I'm glad I'm not sitting in there.
A mutiny at Captain Ken's.
Actually, I'm over at my daughter's house in Orlando.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the Mig-23, Trace on with the Mig-23. If ever there was an abomination of an airplane, I think the Mig-23. It killed their pilots, it killed our pilots because our guys crashed and flying. That's how we lost General Bond. That airplane was a nightmare. The Russians have actually fielded some just inherently dangerous airplanes, but by God, they look cool. My brother built a little 1/72 scale Mig-23. It had, it's had the round radar nose on it, and the wings swept and everything. And I was kind of like, okay, I gotta admit it, this is a cool looking airplane. It just, that big tail and that big nose, is like, this is no, wait a minute, no, it had the little flat nose for ground attack. That's right, because you had the little rocket pods on it, and the Russians love that little lotus shaped, rocket pod. They put it on everything, and it works. And I was like, but everything I've read, the Russian pilots are scared of the airplane, the American pilots are scared of the airplane. It had some really bad habits that, but it goes fast, and if it doesn't kill you, it can do a lot of impressive stuff, but it cannot turn, at least not at speed.
It was designed to go after the B-58. Mig-23 was designed to go after the B-58.
Well, that explains how they had it going so fast, but it was one of their first real capable swing wing airplanes. Bobby Bond was a dummy. Yeah, Bond was going real fast, and apparently they had a problem with it locking up where you couldn't get it out of burner, and you could wedge yourself into a situation that you couldn't climb out of, couldn't get and I was like, and he tried to eject, and he was going way too fast. Yeah, it does like a junk
out of envelope.
Yeah, and the Russians actually have very good ejection systems, as they demonstrated at numerous air shows. And
they like showing off their ejections.
I tell you what, if somebody says, what could you have out of a Russian aircraft, I'll take their ejection system. The BD-5. I actually have a model of BD-5 around here somewhere. That was the little BD jet. That is... He didn't need to aim it. Yeah. Well, basically they were shooting looters. They were trying to take half of Kuwait back with them. And, highway, good Lord. That was exactly the kind of thing the airplane, like the A-10 was made for. You're talking about the desert. There's no trees. There's no place to hide. It's just targets in the open. And,
it's great for tanks, too.
I'll tell you an airplane that... they've and that's why they're still in service today. Even Hoot Gibson was talking about how the Mig-21, and there's a lot of variants of the Mig-20, but it's actually still a viable airplane today. It's fast, it's short ranged, it's a point defense interceptor, but You put a modern radar and missiles in that thing, it's still fast, relatively maneuverable. I mean, you're not going to dogfight an F-16 with it, but you could run away from him. You're not going to run very far, but you are going to run very fast. And he said, if you have those things powered up, armed, ready to go, canopy open, you can be in the air and flap set and everything. You can fire it up and be in the air in a couple of minutes and just streaking towards a target, launch your missiles, turn around, come back. That's why they were successful in Vietnam. That's what they were made to do. They were short-range point defense interceptors. And in that regard, and they were pretty maneuverable too. But by the same token, the F-4 Phantom is still a viable airplane today in some regards. The Germans just retired the last of them. Heck, I don't know, the Israelis may still have a few. But the Phantom is a Mach 2 plus airplane that can carry a truckload of ordnance. It's got a good range. It's durable. Massive radar. You take the F-4 airframe, modern engines, and modern avionics, modern missilery. I mean, again, you're not going to tangle an F-15 or an F-22, but by God, you could go after bombers, rip up ground targets. It's still a very capable platform. And it could run away from a lot of modern airplanes, too. But the aerodynamics have changed a lot. I mean, you look at the Phantom with the swept-down tail and the swept-up tips. Those are all aerodynamic patches to fix stability problems of the airplane. But those massive engines it had and that big radar still made it... The Phantom would have done a lot better than it did if they just taken the gloves off, but they put all these restrictions on the guys and everything. If they let the military just go in and lay waste to the bad guys, it would have been a much more, you got to identify it visually before you shoot. I'm like, how about we know where all our airplanes are, and that way if I know that's not one of our airplanes, I can shoot at distance where I can take advantage of my superior technology. But no, can't do that.
Oh, that's interesting. JM said the throttle on the Mig-23 had a lockout if you were flying too fast. You had to pull the nose up to aerodynamically bleed the speed up before you could retard the throttle.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. And apparently Bonga going so fast at pulling the airplane up, they were afraid it would disintegrate because he was really moving. And
wow, doesn't that give you a warm fuzzy to know you can't slow the plane up in certain conditions?
Yeah. But there have been other aircraft that have had similar kinds of semi-automatic features like that to hopefully keep pilots out of trouble. Even in World War II, a lot of the airplanes had auto lean and a lot of that stuff. You just lock the levers into certain positions and the airplane took care of itself. And I think it was Lindberg was showing them, look, screw that. Pull these things back, pull the power back, pull those props into heavy pitch, and he'd come back with 40 gallons extra more than everybody else. And they were like, hey, you're tearing the engines up. He's like, they're military engines. They're coming off production line. Tear them up. Send them back for a refit. The range is more important. They're just going to melt these things down at the end of the war anyway. Which, when you think about it, an airliner, which, by the way, airliners, the airlines have to get a 30-year life out of them. Okay, to pay them for them more. So they baby them, they take care of them, they keep everything running. And the military has to get a long life out of stuff too because it's expensive. But in a shooting war, the simple fact is that it's still just a military asset. And sometimes it's much more important to get your ordnance on the target than it is to save the airplane. Of course, you don't really think that way if you're the guy flying the airplane. Yeah, I remember seeing F-4s and F-106s and thinking to myself, my God, those are beautiful airplanes. And so are the F-15s and the F-16s. I mean, this is one of those times that form and function really go together well. Usually, what's the old saying? If it looks right, it flies right. And although I got to admit,
something interesting.
The F-35 I don't think is very pretty. It's a good airplane. It's not going to win any beauty contests. You could submit an F-35 in the airplane contest.
Peter says Iran's F-14s have avionics in them from China.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure they've been updating all the systems. I wouldn't be surprised if nothing more than the airframes are original. And don't undersell the Iranians. They got a lot of good engineers and a decent industrial base that they can fabricate parts and stuff and use different weapon systems. I don't think they have too many of them flying, but they still have some of them going. Okay, and the Mig-23, if you're full throttle and chopped it would likely throw a turbine blade. I can believe that.
Robert says those F-14s are probably equipped with Game Boys for avionics.
Hey, don't undersell a Game Boy. But is there a sweet spot?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I think there was. I don't know what it was, but he's flying the P-38s. I know he experimented a lot, and he found that doesn't mean that the factory engineers are going to sign off on it. And if there's one thing Lindberg didn't know about, it was long-range flying. And he was in the Pacific, and that's where he felt that, you could do these things. And he just experimented, and he technically was a factory rep, although he did fly some combat. Apparently, Roosevelt made it a point to keep him out of the war because, he didn't like him. No, it's a whole other story.
Oh?
And the rest of your weekend. Take care, Trey. Hope you have a good one, man.
But I was unaware they didn't like him.
What's that?
I was unaware that they did not like him. Why? Because he was against the war?
I think that had a lot to do with it, but a few other reasons. Lindberg, as I understand it from what I've read, and Lindberg stuff about him's coming out. He was pretty sympathetic to the Germans until he saw how bad they were. That didn't enhance his standing with a lot of people, but he apparently, there's some in his personal life, there's some dark stuff aside from the kidnapping and everything. But he did shoot down a Sonya plane. Okay, and I thought Lindbergh had shot a plane or two down. Sonya's a light bomber, and but one of the things we have a problem with is that we expect our heroes to be more than just being people. And there was the old saying, "Never meet your heroes." Lindbergh was world famous. The world expected these things of him. He had to live in a fishbowl, but he was still a person. He had all the same failings as any other person. He was meticulous. Apparently, he was very much a tree hugger. He was very big into conservation and stuff. His later years, he literally took a picture of him hugging a tree just to help the conservation people use in their material, their literature. That's why he lived in Hawaii for so long. He loved it out there. But I've heard people say that he had a secret family in Germany or someplace or somewhere, and he was all over the globe. So I don't know if that's true or not, but he would have had an extremely low profile about it if he did, because till his death he was still a popular figure. But his place in history was safe. But once you become, he was a superstar, a rock star before we had rock stars. And, we expect actors and musicians to be, Elvis and, the Beatles. We expect them to live on the wild side. But people who, like Lindbergh, are astronauts or great explorers, they're supposed to be perfect in every way. And so...
Okay, let's go back to models.
Yeah, back to models.
Anybody doing any interesting builds? Is that why we were here?
Hoover wore dresses.
You'd think so. Huh. Steve, you've been
Well,
real quiet.
We're all waiting to see. I was listening for a change.
Hmm.
We're all waiting to see what the ugly cars will be.
Well, I have not gotten out to work on mine yet, but today, since I just got back last night, and if I really want to submit an ugly car, I would just take a picture of my Kia. Paint's flaking off, and people are like, "You have a real job. Why do you drive that?" I'm like, "Because no one's going to waste time breaking into it."
Okay.
Airfix Neutral B24. Okay, that look good.
Are you gonna show us what you've done, Max?
No, I was on my last video. I was showing pictures of the surf shark that I'm modifying, making a quasi junker, a teenage rusty beach car out of it. Let me ask you guys a question while I'm here. Assuming I do get to meet this Tamiya executive, and I'd like to ask him how how they decide what they're going to make. And we already talked about Godzilla. Okay, we know that. But what does Tamiya not make that you guys would like to see? And I don't think Tamiya ever made a B-17, did they? Now I got to go look.
Well, what about a B-24?
Well, there are some airplanes that they seem to have not, and my guess is because so many people make them would be my guess is why they didn't. But here I'm going to Scalemates. Let me type. Where's my keyboard over here? Let me type in Tamiya.
Oh boy, Sarah Jane's really whittling it down.
What's that?
Down to 25.
Yeah.
25 what?
He's got a job.
Aircraft, propeller.
It would be interesting to know if Tamiya ever made a B-29.
Peter says they made a B-17 in 1/100th.
You know, I almost kind of don't count that. I mean, it counts, but it doesn't count. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tamiya made a big push to make 1/100 a new scale, and they actually built quite a few 1/100 kits, and they're nice kits. I built one. Okay? The scale just never caught on.
Chris says no Tamiya kit does not manufacture a B-17.
I'm not finding one. You know, I'm not really, except for their C-130, I'm not finding much in the way of 4-engine aircraft at all. Mostly single engine, the Mosquito and the Beaufighter, so smaller twins.
And Chris says the same thing.
I am not seeing one.
Oh, he just said it twice.
Oh. I wasn't paying attention. Okay.
That's interesting. It looks like they shy away from larger airplanes, and I'm just wondering if that's just sort of
Robert
preference.
says they kind of favor British aircraft.
Well, and Japanese. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Nope. Nothing in B-17. Nothing in B-24. Looks like the Mosquito is the... Huh. What's the... Oh, Landcat. Well, I know they didn't do that, but... No, Tamiya does make a one... Tamiya makes a 148... Tamiya makes a 148 scale Lancaster. Have since 1975. Interesting. But you did say they prefer British aircraft. No, they didn't do the Wellington. Grand Slam bomber. They did do the oh my God! They did the B-25 and 1/700 scale to go on their aircraft carriers. If somebody wants to make the do little Raiders.
I'm just ignoring that comment, Ken, because it's wrong.
What's that?
Go ahead.
Did I miss something interesting?
The crowd said all Virgil Exner designed cars are ugly. But they're only made by Joe.
Oh, man. I just heard the glove gauntlet hit the ground.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting.
Not going to say anything, Steve?
No, I'm going to let this one go, Ken, because we don't have enough time.
Got a half hour? Go for it.
Well, didn't they? Yeah, they use the Exner. You know, has anybody made kit models of the Exner cars?
Well, Revell did.
They did.
And Johan did.
Okay.
Yeah, Revell made a whole bunch of those horrible-looking 62, 63 Dodge Plymouth kits that Johan also made.
Well, apparently Renwall made the Jordan Playboy, the 66 Jordan Playboy.
Yeah, well, those were, one-offs.
Yeah. Cool-looking car, though.
Oh, the whole series of cars he did were phenomenal with that. Heck, he's the one who put the forward look in Chrysler, and, the 57 line of the entire Chrysler line was years ahead of what anybody else had.
it always amazed me how car companies, because what it takes to, to put a, car into production. And that these car companies would go out of business with alarming regularity, and I'm just thinking, when you think about what it takes to put a car company, to get it up, get designed, get just massive amounts, and then a couple of years of bad sales and poof, gone.
Well, it's so capital intense. I mean, it's very expensive. It's the old story. You can buy a plastic car and pay $30,000 for it, and if you tried to buy the car part by part, it would cost you $100,000. I mean, when you go into what it takes to design the car, what it does to make the dies, what it does to do the engineering, it's enormous costs. And if you don't sell enough of them, I mean, it costs you money.
Huh. The only figure I can find that Tamiya makes in 124 scale is the racing driver figure. But they make everything in 1:35 scale.
The truss says the 61 Plymouth Valiant is and was so ugly, even a deer wouldn't run in front of it.
But they sold tons of them.
Well, I see Tamiya now has a fairly new series, or at least an updated series of 1/16 scale tanks. Now, there's got to be RCs. Yeah, radio option full kit, yeah. So Tamiya's still doing the whole radio control option thing. Their armor is still, it's the standard. Good as, not as good as.
Even their Formula One kits are the standard. I mean, those things were just ridiculously detailed.
Oh, I didn't know they made a 1/16 scale Kugelwagen. But
now that would be the other part of your meeting the gentleman in California would be to go to Japan and to tour the museum.
Well, that might possibly be in the future, but we're going to see. I don't want to get the cart ahead of the house. I knew I'd built a 1:100 scale Tamiya. I had that helicopter.
How many years have you been married?
My 20th.
Coming up? Oh, coming up. Take Monica to Tokyo, and you could do a Tamiya Godzilla doubleheader.
Oh.
You could stay your wedding evening at the
Godzilla Hotel. Yeah,
it would be
baby.
like Monica imagining your wedding night.
Be a triple header.
There you go.
Oh, I am so not saying anything right now.
Okay, Ken, I finally stumped him.
And this is how you get your friends killed.
Yes, and the first Plymouth Barracuda was out 2 weeks before the Mustang.
Yeah, but I mean, I had a Barracuda and I kind of liked it, but let's be honest, the Mustang, when it came to aesthetics, Barracuda didn't have anything on the Mustang.
Well, the Barracuda was a Valiant with a big glass window in the back.
Not to be confused with the Cuda.
Garfield says Max tours Tamiya factory. Tamiya reports hundreds of kits now missing.
Yeah. Robert goes, live from Tokyo, it's Max and it's Saturday night.
Hey, if they offer me a TV show in Tokyo, by golly.
Hey, Tom Fox says every woman dreams of a Tamiya factory tour.
Okay.
And Sarah Jane goes, I do.
I have to tell you something. before our meeting with this gentleman, I was asked to put together a quick bio, and since he runs a large model factory, I kept it oriented towards it, and I said that I've been building models since a kid, blah blah blah. And I said, when I was in junior high and high school, I built models because I thought my collection of models would impress girls. Somehow I miscalculated on that. What's wrong with girls? And I was like, 13 years old.
With a list of their kids that you've built and destroyed.
Have you ever seen a British sitcom called I think it's called Keeping Up Appearances?
Yes.
With Hyacinth Bouquet, Hyacinth Bucket, right? They had an earlier episode where I guess it's her sister or sister-in-law, the tart, he's picking up guys in a bar. And she goes, so I picked this man up and he asked if I want to go over to his flat and see his collection of model aeroplanes. And I'm like, but of course. Well, why are you so bummed out? Because that's what he showed me. I can tell you anything you want to know about model aeroplanes now. And I sat there watching that and knowing, oh my God. All of a sudden, my teenage years make so much sense.
Natasha says you'd have to get your own container to send the models back from the Tokyo trip.
Well, luckily, to the best of my knowledge, the customs does not have styrene sniffing dogs. What's in the bag? Not a thing.
Wouldn't that be an interesting concept for a movie where drug smugglers make the kits out of cocaine?
They did that.
And then melt them down when they get them in the country.
They did that. Well, they did that in a movie with Gregory Hines and Billy Crystal, and that was Jimmy Smith's breakout role. He was playing the head villain, and they were sending the drugs in. They were making pottery out of it, and
there you go.
They didn't figure it out until they tried to pick the pots up and they dropped one. It smashed and turned back into powder, and so that's like that movie was a Black Sunday where they smuggled the explosives in. It was plastic, but it was all shaped like little Jesuses or something. And anything
explosive.
Yeah, anything that's running scared. That was it, running scared. And
Nathan said, "No female teenage girl has ever uttered the words, gee, I would love to come over and see and look at your model kits."
Well, what can I say? I was the teenager the universe made me. I was a good kid. I think I rightfully earned the biggest insult you could pay a young man. I was safe.
Okay, let's hear this one.
I just said it. I was safe.
He was safe.
He's safe. He's like Earth in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mostly harmless.
Mostly harmless. Yeah.
Ken, you haven't lived.
I like what Robert says here. I built models, and I discovered girls. I got married, and it's back to model building again.
We do go full circle. That's the joy of things, though. And but the real joy is, if you're lucky, is teaching your kids. And I never met a modeler on a date.
Never heard a girl say, "Oh wow, I'm impressed by his model collection."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but when I was about, I forget how old, 12 years old or so, we had a room fire, and a pillow fell on a space heater, caught fire. My brother woke me up, and we ran out of the room, and it gutted the room, and it melted the shelves, everything on the shelves above our beds, which is where we kept most of our models. And I think we had counted them, that we had 72 models on those shelves, mostly on 1/72nd scale. And of course, they looked like a painting by Dali the next morning, everything extruded, and and the ones on the top shelf only got slightly deformed. And I was thinking, they actually look kind of cool in a weird way. But and then I had the shelf collapse here. So fire and gravity are the mortal enemies of me and my model collection. But we just saw it as an opportunity to start over in 1/48 scale. Do you want to see my fox bat?
Hey, Henry, would you like to see my Dremel?
I am ashamed to acknowledge this, to admit this, but I guess I have to, given this is what we're talking about. Because I was like 17 years old, and I'm at a bookstore, and it's Friday night. All the teenagers are out running around the mall, and I'm looking at a book of airplanes, right? Back when we had actual bookstores. And this cute girl I'd never seen before came up and started telling me, "Oh, you like airplanes?" "Oh, yeah." And I start telling her about airplanes, and I'm like, dumbass. I mean, I was innocent enough to think she was interested in aeroplanes. I'm like, oh my God. Oh well.
See now, this would be, we could do our own movie, which would be like weird science with models that become girls.
Man, you really do have a weird mind.
Oh, yeah.
Steve marches to a different drummer.
Models that become girls.
I mean, what can I think of?
I'm not sure. I'm not. So what does my tiger tank become? Brunhilde?
Sarah Jane feels outnumbered strangely.
Yeah. Welcome to the club. It's alive.
It's alive.
Frank says either the models go or I go, so have a good life, honey.
Oh no, Ken, you remember the cartoon about the guy with the model train?
No, which one?
Okay, this is a cartoon. I think it was a model railroading magazine, and it's like the guy's wife is there in her nightie trying to get him to come to bed. He's got this little model train layout, and he goes, "Come on, woman, not now. Can't you see I'm trying to run a railroad?"
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one. Now that you mention it.
It's not only that Sarah Jane's unique because she's one of the few girls that builds models, but she does such good work.
Nathan says, Sarah, indeed you're in a very exclusive club. And my many, 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 many years of going to hobby stores, I never remember meeting a female human inside one.
I did, but they were always buying models for their kids or husbands. In fact, there could be a joke in that. You know what you call a woman at a hobby shop buying a model? Married. Because you know she's buying that for her husband.
If women would ever figure it out, what a perfect place to find a future husband is in a hobby shop.
Yeah, because the guy will be in the basement all the time, never bothering you.
I was going to say.
Or out in the bars, or getting drunk or anything. He's down in the basement building models. You know where he's at.
Yeah, there's no question about that.
What I always tell my wife, it's cheaper than hookers.
Don't ever get divorced. She gets half your stash.
And just for spite, she'd burn it.
I'll build every one. I would build every one of them in one night. But don't forget the nose art.
That weird guy with plastic.
You have to be careful though, because I've stumbled on a couple of subject matters, even in the kit model community. I was like, they make models of that? Okay, I delete that from my browser history.
Frank says, I'd rather find a woman in a hobby store than one in a produce section.
And Nathan says, I don't know, Ken, have you seen the price of model kits lately? It really is cheaper.
And the crowd
nobody
says,
ever
in a laundromat.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You see, when my wife ordered the new B-24 I'm working on now, you see, that's how women use models to rope guys. Models and food.
And models are cheaper than sports like golf, skiing, and hockey. Painted my sister's nails plenty of times.
There you go.
I meant wipe the old-fashioned way in a bar.
Did you use an airbrush?
It's funny. I was in the Army. We were at a civilian drop zone, and there was a girl there who was an artist who used an airbrush, and you would give her one of your T-shirts, and she would airbrush your canopy. You show her what the colors of your canopy were. She would airbrush your canopy and a parachute, and make a nice on your own T-shirt. She charged like $10 or $20. It wasn't much, and she did real nice work. And she's an airbrush, and I was thinking at the time, wow, that would really be handy for model building. I should get one of those. Not realizing that, and I was like, wait a minute, you mean you don't have to use a rattle can? But I don't think I had an airbrush until I was 30-something years old. It was a paintbrush or a rattle can. And you get pretty good with it after a while.
Nathan says, I don't know, guys. Andy's Hobbies headquarters has a $700 Titanic model sitting on a shelf.
Isn't that the thing Keeler's working on?
That's the one Keeler's working on, yep.
How's he doing anyway?
He's having a rough time. He's going through some intense therapy to kind of get him back to speed.
Well, I hope they do, because I'd love to see that. I mean, I hope they do, because I want to see him healthy. But I'm interested because the way he does things. If he takes on that Titanic, it's going to be a masterpiece when he's done.
Oh, he's been showing me pictures as he laid off it a while, but he was sending me pictures. It was phenomenal. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, and it's huge. I mean, it is just gigantic. He was thinking of donating it. They have artifacts from the Titanic exhibit in one of the casinos down in Atlanta, in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I went to one of the Titanic displays.
And he was talking to them about, when he's finished with it, of having it there.
Yeah.
Which is probably it's probably better put together than the original ship.
This is exactly Robert. Either that, or he has a very, very understanding wife, or he has not told her about the purchase yet.
Well, Keeler is a world famous master modeler. For him, the model building stuff's more of a work tool. But I wonder.
Somebody sent him that.
No, really.
He asked. I think the guys from Atlanta sent him. He asked them if they could get a discount for it, and it showed up. Lance says a golf course is a horrible waste of a good rifle range.
Hear, hear. If I kill the golfers, they'll put me in prison. I say golfers, not golfers. Gopher Kong.
Garfield wants to know, did Lego make an iceberg kit to go along with the Titanic kit?
Oh, man, too soon. Let me ask you a question, Steve. Let's say that Tamiya did make a Godzilla model. How many realistically do you think they could expect to sell?
I'd say they could probably sell 50,000.
It's really not that many, when you think about it. I'm just thinking what they'd have to, the cost of setting up and what they would have to charge for it. What if they made it?
Well, it'd be a lot of money too, because it would probably be big.
Yeah.
So it would probably be a couple of $100 kit.
Oh, at least. I'm thinking 1/72 scale, which would make it about 3 feet tall. What do you think? $500-600?
Yeah, which was a lot of money. I mean, I'm sure it would be exquisite, but you got companies like X Plus, they're putting out some pretty good stuff, and their stuff's still in the $100 range,
Yeah. Good.
Lance said, I once played a 9-hole golf course. My score was in the 90s. I never played golf again.
Why? You scored 10 on each hole.
I had trouble getting that good a score at putt-putt.
It's just what do you call that? Law of attrition. You just keep hitting it. Eventually it'll go in the hole.
Yeah.
That's the way I shoot pool. Ken shot pool with me. He knows pretty much I get by on just just keep shooting, something will drop.
Robert said they'd give it be a sellout if they could make Godzilla have fire come out from a small propane can in his body.
We can make that happen. Little resin here and there.
Just put a spray paint can in there and a little flame in front of it. That's all.
You see, one of the things is that a lot of kits, like their Phantom kit, they can rebox that with a few extra parts, and make a dozen different versions of it. Same goes with a lot of cars, tanks, and everything else. There's a lot of stuff you can reuse in other kits. You don't necessarily cut new molds. But for something like Godzilla, that's it. It's not like the parts are usable for anything else. And
that's what it's going to look like. It's.
I don't think the licensing is the issue because Atlantis had a Toho license, so
yeah, it's not. It can't be that expensive.
And
I would think with all of the new, emphasis surrounding the new Godzilla movies and Godzilla -1, that Tamiya would be a willing participant.
I was wondering why they haven't looked into that because this is what they do. And my guess is that they've considered it, run the numbers and just said, yeah, we can make more money putting those same resources into other things, which I'm completely guessing on that.
Look at it this way: they make a plane, they make a boat, they make a car. They're making some of these same kits for 20 years, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
How many Godzillas are you going to make? After a while, you're going to saturate that market.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see as a concern. But I suppose they could do a series. Godzilla, King Kong, Rodan.
Yeah, they could.
Mothra.
They actually could. And there's got to be a reason, which you will find out, Reporter Max, when you have the meeting.
Should it come to pass, and I am personally, I think my wife was right. She goes, look, I'll guarantee you they've looked at this and the numbers didn't work. And I'm like, it's probably right. Because like I say, there are 30 companies out there making some variation. But if you could sell 50,000 of them at $600 a throw, is that worth what it would take for a company the size of Tamiya to get into it? And,
meanwhile, now remember though, when you go to the meeting, if you go in a Godzilla costume, maybe that would sway them.
I'm pretty sure the other participants would just. I don't know who this person is.
Now, that is a good idea. A semi-submerged Godzilla waterline model. You didn't have to saw them in half.
Well, that's what I'm planning. That's what I'm planning to do with the other Godzilla I've got. I'm going to use the top half to make a waterline Godzilla that I can pose my model ships with, and then I'm going to use the bottom half to make Haruno Nakajima's costume from the movie with the shoulder straps and everything. The first one, the one he fell over in that they decided they couldn't use.
The crowd says Godzilla cannot swim.
Tell Godzilla that. But for those who don't know, Haruno Nakajima, who was the guy one of the guys in the Godzilla costume, the one who's probably most famous for it. The first suit they made was so stiff and everything so heavy they couldn't use it. So they cut it in half, put shoulder straps on it, and he would just stand in it up to his waist. and that's what they use for the close-ups of like his feet crushing things and stuff.
And he used to lose about 25 to 30 pounds in water every time he put the whole suit on.
Yeah, there was no ventilation in it or anything. And he would sweat out.
And the hot
lights. He dehydrated. And he caught on fire one time, for real. And they kept it in the movie.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, it was good footage, They weren't going to waste it. The trooper that he was, he just kept on acting.
Keep moving. It looks good in the camera. Keep going.
Well, when they made the set, one thing is they made a different costume for every movie. The only costume that got recycled on some kid's TV show or something, and they just put like a collar around his neck with something on it. He's like, that's the Godzilla costume. But pretty much they used a different costume in every movie. And he said first when they learned too heavy, second one was functional, but all the props. After that, by the time they did the first Mothra movie, they said the costume, it was much more flexible. He could get around in it better. But you can tell when he walks because the skin flaps around so much, But the actor loved it. It didn't look as good on camera. But now, of course, it's mostly CGI. But anyway.
Fran makes a good point. He says Tamiya never ventured into any fantasy-type categories.
No, and they did a little bit of sci-fi stuff in the 60s, like that Apollo 1 vehicle that they came up with, the tractor.
Yeah, but that was like in or out, and that was, when they were making toy stuff.
Yeah, now that thing, if you find one, people want a starting price to be $300.
They're in the thousands.
Yeah, well, like that Westinghouse nuclear power plant, or the, is what it is. What was that Johan kit that they cut up the mold to change so you can't find one anymore? Was it not the El Dorado, it was the El Camino?
Oh no, that was the Revell kit, the Country Squire station wagon they cut up to make the Ranchero.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that was.
So you can never the Ranchero kits. They're like $300-400.
And you probably wouldn't want to build it because it's so rare.
Yeah, and not a lot of parts either.
You guys looking at compressors and stuff.
One night it was complete, and they wanted like $350, and I had to sit there and say, "Can I sneak this in the house?"
Then the styrene sensors your wife put on the door frame, went, and he's got a kit.
Well, the worst thing I ever do is like when something's on there that I would really like, I'll call Keeler up. Well, you should put a bid in. The last 2 times he told me that, I wound up winning.
Yeah, but you got a good deal on them too.
Well, not really, but okay.
James Taylor says for $500, someone will carve you a large Godzilla with a chainsaw.
Yeah, but you got to live in Minnesota.
Well, that's where they do it out of ice. Godzilla on ice. The Godzilla ice capades.
Who makes the best Godzilla model kit in your opinion?
Polar Lights. The big one I have right here, the Polar Lights, the original 54 Godzilla.
Polar Lights one, yeah, it's probably the best one.
Yeah, I think it is. It's also 16 inches tall, so it's pretty big. And the only thing that kit did quote unquote wrong is the tank that they have with it is the wrong scale and the wrong type. So I wouldn't put that on the I wouldn't put it on the diorama. It's a 1:144 scale, so your tank should be about that big, and it gives you a tank that's like 1:64 scale, and it's also I think a Type 10 that came out years later. Yeah, they were using M24 Chaffies in the original movie, which is what that one's from. Well, guys, it's time to wrap up another one. My wife and I are going to have dinner and probably watch some television. By the way, we've been watching Fallout, and there's some potential there for some figure kits. The Ghoul and some of the other characters. And
that is a weird show.
It is, but it's got a certain charm to it.
It does. It's kind of addicting, but it's still kind of weird.
Oh, that is weird.
I like how they do the sort of 50s, but it's the future stuff.
Yeah.
I like that.
Like an alternate history kind of thing, And
by the way,
I wish he would come out with the model kit of that Kaiju that he drives.
Yeah.
Before the bomb drops.
Yeah.
But,
well, you said those were Exner's cars, right?
The computer terminals that they use in Fallout are Wang VS terminals. I used to work on those years ago.
Hey, Ken, what happened with that store in Orlando? Did you go there today?
I did. I sent Max some interesting pictures of some stuff.
They had an old Weber ejection seat and some part off the Canadian arm for the shuttle and some other cool stuff. I don't know if it ever been into space, but
a mine finder,
mine detector.
Yeah, landmine detector from World War II.
Isn't that called a prisoner of war?
Yeah, the electric kind. Well, guys, I want to thank everyone for coming out and spending some time with us tonight. I hope you had a little bit of fun. Guys, if you want to say your goodnights, we'll let the good people go and I'll shut the office down and go. And for those who came in late, I'll just reiterate that this Model F4 Phantom that I have here is, you guys may recall that my next door neighbor was the Rio from the only Marine Corps crewed Phantom to get a MiG kill in Vietnam. I wanted to make a model of his airplane. It turns out the Tamiya kit is his airplane. 5526 and from the 333rd, the Fighting Shamrocks. By the way, those are shamrocks on the tail, not clovers. And
I'd be interesting to see his face when you tell him that.
I don't know if he already knows or not, but I am definitely looking forward to telling him.
Max is going to go over and tell him, and he goes, "Oh yeah, here's all the commission checks from Tamiya."
Yeah, I don't think it works that way when you're public sector. You know, you're a historical figure. Well, guys, I am just going to loop the outro and let you guys chat amongst yourselves for a while if you like. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, guys. I'll let you say your adioses, and we'll be on our way.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for participating as usual. You were a great audience, and we hope to see you again soon.
Good night, everybody. It's been a lot of fun, as usual. Love the comments. Some of you guys have some really interesting sense of humor. Y'all have a good night.
Guys, take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.
Okay. Okay, going in now. Get out, get out. Oh, God, look. Get out, get out. There, sexy Jack.